Hey everybody, it's your girl Planet Time on deck. I hope you guys are having a great day, afternoon, and or evening whenever you guys are seeing this. So thank you guys so much for tuning back in with me, and Happy New Year's. Today, I'm going to be doing a quick video on how to ace an interview for beginners. If you guys want to hear the tips that I have put together, all you guys got to do is stay tuned. Okay guys, so thank you guys so much for tuning back in. And as a quick PSA, for those of you guys who are missing my true crime stories, don't worry. I will be putting together more stories for you guys coming up. I have some good stuff that I've been working on, and I think that you guys are gonna like it. So you guys stay tuned for more of my true crime. Now, without further ado, let's get into these tips that you guys can use if you want to ace a job interview for beginners, but everybody's welcome to watch, as you might just be out there on the market looking for a second job. Perhaps you haven't been out there in a long time, so you kind of forgot what it's like, and you just wanted, a quick little refresher. This video will help you too. So let's jump into number one. Number one, I know that more people would assume this tip is more obvious, but not necessarily, okay? So the first tip is don't be tardy. Yeah, tardy and late mean the same thing. Don't be late, don't be tardy, don't be running late, don't be behind, don't, none of it. 5 minutes late is super late, okay? The best way to be to any job interview is early, okay? Because when you are early, you are truly what? On time, all right? I once had an interview with a candidate who came up 30 minutes late. Now, the whole thing about it is you're tardy. Everything's a factor. It all factors in to determine if that candidate's going to get the job or not. Now, this particular candidate actually had a lot of other key things going for themselves, which actually enabled them to get past that whole tardy thing. But it was still something that was circling around in the back of my head, is if this person's going to be dependable. Okay, so one thing that I would say is that whatever you do, try your very best. If there's no other possible solution or way you can get around that, then it's just it is what it is. But if it's at all possible, do not be tardy. Okay, all right. So number two, and for those of you guys listening at home, line up the comments and let me know, have you guys ever went to a job interview tardy? And if so, what was the outcome for you? You guys know I always want to hear about what your experience is, right? Okay, so now let's dance to number two. So one of the most common questions asked during an interview is, what do you know about the company? Especially for companies that are either corporations, governmental agencies, nonprofits, or mom and pop businesses. Everybody wants to know, what do you know? What do you know about us? Well, not necessarily mom and pop businesses, because that can be like the small corner stores, that's a mom and pop business too, or like the little family bakery. They don't really care. They really want to know if you have past experience, right? Okay, but more so for like corporations, government jobs, and nonprofit agencies, a lot of companies like that, they want to know, what do you already know about them? Even Fortune 500 companies, what do you already know? So a tip for number two is, if before you go to the interview, take a few minutes, Google the company. If the company's name, for example, is Planet Tie, go Google Planet Tie, go to Planet Tie's About Me section on their website and read who they are, what they do, what their company mission is, and what they're all about. So if you don't know them, you can at least digest that very bare minimal, so that when you're talking to your interviewer and they say, oh, okay, so how did you hear about this company? You may have heard about it through a friend. Oh, I heard about it, I saw something on social media or something else like that, whatever the case may be. But you can also throw in, well, I do know that your mission and your brand is to, be a recognized name that people can trust. You can throw something in like that, because every little point, it matters. People are looking, they are listening, your interviewer, they're looking, they're listening, they're paying attention to all this. So you want to act like you are there with them, and that you are completely engaged in being a part of that establishment. Okay, so tip number two, if you do not know what the company does, Google them before you get there and go to their About Me section. All right, y'all light up the comments and let me know if you guys ever done that one. Okay, so a public service announcement before I go any further. If you guys are applying to work at a place like Jamba Juice, KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, anything else like that, and yeah, anything like that, what you guys can do is you guys can bypass number two, because Googling, McDonald's, I think everybody pretty much traditionally knows what McDonald's does and what they're all about. KFC the same and all that other stuff. You guys can bypass doing number 2. Instead, just make sure that you show up on time to your interview, okay, that you look presentable, okay, in a way that's going to best represent yourself, not necessarily with cut up jeans or any see-through attire or anything else like that. You wouldn't go with any shoulders out or anything else like that. Just go presentable. Go make sure that you are on time. Do not use any slurs. Don't use any slurs, because people are always listening and paying attention. And the way that you interact with them, the theory is you may interact that same way with the clients and customers of the business, and it can be considered inappropriate if you're using slang and so forth. So generally, if you stick to that, if you're applying to work at one of those places that I just listed, generally it's good enough to get you a starting point in the door where they'll, it just goes down to skill. Do you have experience? Have you ever done this or that before? And keep in mind, the beautiful thing about if you don't have experience is you can always be taught on the job, okay? There is on-job training for every job you will just about ever do. They can train you, okay? You guys with me? All right, light up the comments if you guys are with me there. You guys see where I'm going? Okay, so now let's dance to number 3. Number 3, if you're called for an interview, you will likely speak with the hiring supervisor or team lead. Likely you're already speaking to the person or somebody close to them that you're going to be reporting directly to. Okay, so be sure to ask different questions, like during the interview. Be sure to ask different questions like what is the dress code, or what is your policy on the dress code, right? So what you want to establish by asking the dress code policy is that you will be able to be compliant. If the policy is that you cannot wear ripped jeans or blue jeans or saggy jeans, or you cannot wear white t-shirts, you want to know that ahead of time. You don't want to show up to an interview in a white t-shirt, saggy jeans, or ripped jeans if that is against their dress code policy, because the impression may be that you are a person who they're going to have to, kind of get together. They're going to have to work with you a bit. So if you ask ahead of time, you can already come in the image as if you are a person who is already working there. It is easier to see someone who is already aligned with what your company, what a company already has in place. You guys get me? All right, so that's where I'm going with that. Now, I should also say this, because in the day and time that we have a lot of work at home businesses now, due to, everything that's going on around the world, a lot of interviews are, especially for work at home jobs, I will say this, a lot of interviews are held via Zoom calls or via Teams or via Google Connect or whatever else, right? A lot of, interviews are being held virtually these days. Now, if you are a person who finds yourself getting ready to attend a virtual interview, one thing I will say is this: before you turn your camera on, look around you and make sure that there is nothing in your camera shot that can be construed as are considered offensive, harassing, threatening in any way, or obscene. Okay, sometimes people have pictures around their house on their walls, whether it be of the drug paraphernalia or exotic pictures and things like that, and they don't even recognize it because it's a part of their daily makeup, right? But once you turn that camera on, you have to understand you just allowed somebody else into your world and into your home. So make sure that you are presentable, just meaning your daily best if you're going to an interview. If you are going to a virtual interview, consider that virtual interview the same way that you would an interview in person. Dress like it, okay, is what I'm going to say. Dress like you're going to an interview in person. Give your daily best, or your Sunday's best, or whatever the saying is, and make sure that you are prepared to sit for a minimum of 30 to 45 minutes or an hour, depending on how long they say the interview is going to be, and be prepared to just have a conversation about business, your history, and so forth. All right, you guys, light up the comments and let me know if you guys have ever had a virtual interview. Okay, so now we're going to dance on to number 4. Okay, so number 4, don't overtalk your interviewer, right? So here's the situation. It's your interviewer. You're sitting across the table. They're sitting, on the opposite side of the table, and they're asking you questions, right? Questions at some point, depending on who your interviewer is, they can seem, first it can seem like an interrogation almost, right? They're asking you, explain this, explain that, give me a little bit more information about this or that. And then it can turn into, now you're relaxed, now you're comfortable, and your interviewer is laughing, you're laughing. You guys are just two human beings who just happen to meet because you're in an interview, right? Okay, so what I'm going to say is that if your interviewer is asking you, when your interviewer is talking, you're not talking, okay? You put your lips on this when they're talking. You zip it, right? You wait till they finish everything that they're going to say. You sit there and you attentively listen to them, of course. And then after they complete everything they're going to say, then you chime in and you give your response. Do not interrupt them, okay? Because the overall thought is, if you're interrupting them while they're talking during the interview, is this just a bad manners thing? Or is it an excitement thing? Is it just a you type thing? Or are they going to have to worry about you doing that with other people that you interact with? Whether those other people are your coworkers, whether those other people are clients, whether those other people are management and or upper management, okay? That's something that's going to have to be thought about. So what you want to do is, you don't want to interrupt them while they're talking, and you don't want to over talk the interviewer. I once had a client come in before for an interview, and during the interview, it was going well. It was going really well. Actually, within the first 10 minutes of the interview, I had already decided, this is my candidate. I'm going to hire this person. And as the interview went on, it became more and more interesting, because this person right before my eyes seemingly turned into a completely different person. Now, I consider myself to be a fairly good attentive listener. I will put my lips on this and be extreme and allow you to have the floor to express yourself. Now, while that's happening, I'm also checking for other key components, and I may do another video about that if you guys are into this one, to give you guys tips on what interviewers may be checking for while you're talking, okay? Y'all like the comments and let me know if you're interested. Okay, so aside of that, this person, they kept talking and talking. The conversation started turning into something else. A whole nother part of that person started being presented directly in front of me, and I wasn't as comfortable with hiring that person as I was the one 10 minutes ago who was talking, right? So this is another reason why I say, don't over talk. Don't, because it's just not necessary. You can talk yourself into a blessing or out of one. Light up the comments if you guys know what I mean. Okay, now let's dance over to number 5. Okay, number 5. This is important, guys, right? And I wouldn't think that I would have to say this, but I've experienced it where a couple, different people have done this, and I'm not sure why they did it, okay? Now, keep in mind, it is illegal to ever judge someone based on this, so of course I wouldn't judge them based on this, but as an interviewer, when you hear certain things, it's going to ring bells for you. Like, I'm not sure, why would you ever say something like that? Because one, it's none of my business. Okay, let's jump into number 5, because I can talk forever. So number 5, don't volunteer medical information. Don't do it. It's not necessary. Here's a fun fact. In the state of California, your employer is not going to ask you about medical information. They're not ever going to ask you about your personal health or whatever else, and they shouldn't, okay? No one's going to do that. You, on the other hand, during an interview, you should also not volunteer that information. Here's an example. If a person wants to work for a construction company, during the interview, they should never tell the interviewer, oh yeah, I really would like to do this construction job, but I black out, every other day, and I get headaches, but aside of that, I'm good to go doing the construction job. Now, if somebody were to say something like that, as an interviewer, you would have to think, so this sounds like a safety issue, right? It doesn't sound like this person would be physically safe or mentally healthy enough to be, well, they could be mentally healthy enough, but definitely not safe enough to be doing a job that requires physical labor. If they can black out or pass out, that can become dangerous to them and other parties around them. Okay, so that's why it's important. You don't need to volunteer any medical information whatsoever, okay? If there is something going on and you feel the need to express that, you can express that to your employer after, it's decided if you're going to even get the job or not, because wouldn't it be just, something else if you volunteered a whole bunch of information and it turns out you weren't their candidate, So some of it you can kind of keep that under the hat, okay? I'm going to say it's good enough to keep that under the hat, all right? So yeah, so number 5, don't volunteer medical information. Okay, now let's dance on to number 6, and we're just about to wrap this thing up. Okay, so number 6. Now you would think that it would be obvious to one. However, in the interest of covering all bases, I'm just going to share this one anyhow. Please, again, pretty please, do not use racial epithets or slurs during your interview. Don't do it. It's distasteful, it's tacky, and to be honest with you, nobody really wants to work with someone if they're in an interview and they're already using a bunch of slurs and a bunch of epithets. Why? Because why? Why would someone want to work in that type of environment? I certainly don't. I don't want to work around anybody who's going to come and behave nasty in the very beginning. Now, many moons ago, I had an interview. I was actually a candidate for an interview, let me say it like that, came in, and I was talking to the person, and they began to read. They were giving me a story about, I was asking them something about a moment in time that they were most proud of, and they start telling me about a situation with their children, and they referred to their kids as certain epithets, right? And then they said that their neighbors also referred to their kids as certain epithets. And I was completely taken aback because I didn't understand why in the world would that story be presented in an interview. It's the wrong place. It's also showing that you're not necessarily exercising the best judgment, right? Because if it's a good judgment call, if you tell your interviewer, a whole bunch of racial epithets about your children, about what you call them and what your neighbors call them, what would you tell potential clients of the business? Would you decide to share that story and be candid about it with them? I don't know. So, but there's just a bunch of things that goes through, because you have to keep in mind the interviewer is human just like you. They're not any magical being. They're not extra special. They're just a person who's in a position to screen people to see if they can do the job. That's really pretty much it. They may be in a higher position of power or authority, whatever, but they're just a human being at the very core. Don't ever forget that part, okay? But sharing epithets or anything or slurs like that is definitely a big no. And guess what? Heck no. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay? So number 7. This one pretty much has a lot of the same principle as number 6, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. Don't discuss religion or politics during an interview. Okay? Now, religion and politics are two things that can divide people just like the Red Sea, okay? Don't bother discussing either, because you could assume that the person that you're talking with is on the same level as you. You can assume that they must share the same belief as you in some way, and then you'll be terribly surprised to realize that actually, in fact, they did not share that same belief with you. They were gravely offended by something that you said, or even disgusted. It just depends on what it is that you say, right? But that can be a huge turnoff, right? And if you turn an interviewer off like that, if you start sharing, certain religious beliefs or political beliefs, and it doesn't sit well, remember, that's just a human being sitting across the table from you. Well, if they are likely going to be your supervisor, do you think they're going to want to supervise somebody who they have a very strong opposing opinion against in certain private sectors? Not likely, but the reality is they should never know that about you anyhow. They should never know your personal opinion on that. It's not their business. They do not care. And furthermore, they will not ask you anything of the sort. They shouldn't. If they do, it's a problem. They should never be asking you, what's your religious beliefs? How do you stand on this? They should never be asking you, who did you vote for? Are you a Republican or a Democrat? Or are you part of the Tea Party? They should never ask you anything like that, okay? And they likely won't. So also feel free not to volunteer it. You guys with me? All right. So let's go on to number 8. Okay, number 8. When the interviewer asks you, do you have any questions for me, right? So you guys have already went over your history of employment, what you did, what was your favorite job and why, how do you handle stressful information. If you guys would like me to include another video later on about, different tips and questions that may be asked during an interview, I'll go ahead and put that together at another time. Okay, but so now that you guys have already went through the meat of the interview, right? The meat is the heaviest part of it, right? Now that you guys have already went through the meat and it's winding down, right? If they kept you that long, they likely see you as a good candidate, okay? So now they may ask you, do you have any questions for me, right? Now, sometimes people say, oh, no, I have no questions at all whatsoever. Thank you for your time. Get up, shake your hand, and hit the dough. If that's your preference, that's your preference. However, asking a couple of questions is a good sign, because a couple questions, remember, an interview is a business arrangement. it's not just for the interviewer, but it's for the candidate as well. It's only when both parties come together that business is done, okay? So you have a right to ask questions just like them. Now, I would suggest not being long-winded with the questions, okay? You don't want to sit here and say, as a matter of fact, I do, and pull out a notebook with about 15 questions. That's not a good sign. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not a good sign. I'd stay away from that, okay? But if you have 2-3 questions, that's totally fine. And if you could never think of questions, you can always ask questions like, okay, so what are your standard business hours? So the hours of the position that I'm applying for, the standard hours would be between what time? Is that 9 and 5 or 8:30 to 4:30? You can always ask questions like that. You can ask about the holiday schedules. You can ask them about dress code. Hey, so what's the standard dress code here again? You know, fragrance. Do you guys have any fragrance policies? You guys, let me tell you something. Fragrance is a big thing because there are people who have allergies to certain scents. And if those allergies are activated and you're the one who activated them, that can turn into, you know, it can at some point disciplinary action, okay? So you want to make sure that you ask about that ahead of time so that you're in the know, all right? You guys with me? All right? Okay, so let's dance on to number 9, and then we're just about to wrap this thing up. Number 9. I always feel like I shouldn't have to say certain things, but out of all the stuff I've seen in my personal experience, I know that I do, okay? This one, don't lie, okay? That's literally number 9. Don't lie. Okay, so about your social media accounts or what you already know about the company, do not lie, okay? I once had a candidate come in for an interview, and the candidate said they knew all about the company that they were interviewing for, the company that I was the interviewer for, right? And they said they knew all about the company and this and that. They had even done business with the company they were interviewing for. And I said, oh yeah? Well, when was that? You know, and what service were we able to help you with, right? And they said, oh, you know, it was around this year or that year. I don't really remember. Here's a fun fact, guys. The likelihood that your interviewer has an opportunity and has ways to check to see if you actually did do business with that company, 99% of the time they will be able to check. So there's no point in lying in saying you did business with the company or that you used the service in the past several times, because they can go check. Remember, they already have your information based on your resume. So it's very simple for them to check and see if you did ever do that. Now, why is that important? Some people might question, why is that important, right? It's important because if you lie and they can prove that you've already lied, if they were considering giving you an opportunity, they may have to look at that opportunity with a lot of question marks now, right? Now you have to think to yourself at home, if you have your own business, right? This is your business now. It is Planet Ties, whatever shop, right? If that's my own business, it's mine. I pay the cost to be the boss. Everything that comes through legal and otherwise is all on me. I don't want a candidate that I can't trust, right? If I can't trust that you're even going to tell me the truth about the basic things in the beginning, why would I want to dance with you down the line? You know what I mean? So that's just something to think about. So it's like being more honest than not is always the best policy, okay? It is always the best policy. Another thing, for people who with their social media, a lot of people have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, all these TikTok, all these different social media platforms, which is fine. People are allowed to have their social media platforms, whatever the case may be. However, if an employer ever asks you during an interview, can you give me the information, or do you have social media, right? And if so, please provide me with your social media platforms. If you say, no, I don't have any social media. However, a Google search shows that your social media is in your first and last government name, and they see all this stuff about you on social media. All what stuff? Whatever you decide to lie about. That's what stuff, guys. Because what was the lie for? If you know, under your name, if you have a whole bunch of semi-nude pictures, if you have pictures holding or using drugs in any way, if you have pictures with a lot of alcohol and a lot of extra activity going on, whatever the case may be, of course that goes to your overall image as a person. Now, a lot of you guys might think, oh, that doesn't matter, or why does it matter? But as human beings, yes, it does. Whatever image that you're presenting to your employer or potential employer will matter. So that's the reason for number 9, don't lie. Don't bother lying in the beginning, right? If there is any way for you to either put your social medias on mute, or if there's any way that your social media is not in your government name, you mean in your legal birth name, okay, fine. If you say you don't have it, then hey, you don't have it, But if you say you don't have it, but it's in your first and last name, your legal name, and any and everybody can find out what it is, think about that. It's an obvious lie that can be found out. So just don't bother. All right. Now, you guys light up the comments and let me know what you guys think about these tips. This is the 10th and final tip for today. How to interview to get the job for beginners. Okay. And the 10th tip that I have for you guys today. Let me see. When you get home, sometimes, so you've had your interview, right? Now, likely your interview will go well. If you were able to stay the whole 15, 30 minutes or hour of the interview, you had a good conversation with your interviewer, likely that means you're a strong candidate and the interview generally went well if you completed the whole thing. If your interview was ever cut short for whatever reason, that's another video, but I can tell you some of the reasons why it might be cut short. But if you were able to go the full duration, a full 30 minutes or an hour or 15 minutes, depending on what industry you're trying to get in. It could be fast food. They only need 15 minutes, okay? But if any other industry, they're going to need a little bit longer. If you're able to withstand that and you finish, one thing that you want to do is consider the fact that your interviewer, they've had clients come in before you, and they're going to have clients come in after you. You're not the only one. So you have to take this as an opportunity to make a lasting impression on your interviewer. Okay, so perhaps you said something, you were just being yourself, and no, you were not trying to step out and be anyone else, you were just being yourself, but perhaps you said something witty or interesting or statistical or a fun fact, something to make them remember. Why do I need to remember this candidate? Oh yeah, because that was the candidate who gave the story about the carrot, right? Just an example. Anything that's going to keep you on their mind in a positive light, right? Okay, so now we're at the point where the interview is over and you return home. Now, before 5 o'clock, because 5 o'clock is generally the close of business day for, pretty much business hours if you are working in like a corporate America, government job, or a nonprofit or anything else like that. That business hours are usually between 9 to 5, 8 to 4:30, something like that. Before the end of the day, you want to send a thank you email to your interviewer, right? Dear Planet Ty, it was a pleasure talking to you today. I really enjoyed the information that you gave me about A, B, C, and D. I know that you have other clients coming in, but I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. Have a great day. Signed, Planet Ty, right? Something like that. It doesn't have to be long and drawn out, and it doesn't have to be anything that's so extreme. However, you do want that employer to know, okay, you do want that employer to know that, one, you appreciate the interview, and two, you want to keep yourself on their mind. All right? All right, guys, I know this one was a bit long, but that is all the tips that I have for you guys today in regards to how to get the job for beginners, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. If you are new, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you are returning, thank you so much and welcome back. All right, well, like I always say, there's always another story to be told, but for now, bye.